watching Thrifty Kaniffy. Hello everyone and welcome to Thrifty Kaniffy. So we're going to be looking at a 2 for Tuesday today. 2 knives for Tuesday. This is an open tag response to Knife Delights. Tom over at Knife Delights has a great channel. Make sure you go check him out. He's a buck knives lover. Also likes to do cleanup videos like I do myself. And also has a nice taste in the antique knives that he finds used in his area. But just a really nice channel. Make sure you check him out. Tom's a great guy. So what we're going to be doing is looking at 2 knives today that are related. Primarily want to focus on the top knife here, the Sabre Monarch 205, and talk about how these 2 knives are related. So let's jump right into it. Gets a little convoluted, so try to stick with me. So we're looking at basically 2 different knife companies here. Okay, so the top one here made by Cole National is the main company, and they had brands of Sabre and American Knife Company, and they also owned K-Bar for a while. I'm not exactly sure the history of the K-Bar part of it, but Cole National out of Cleveland, Ohio, and made knives in Hong Kong, Japan, Ireland, Germany, and the USA. Now this is a USA made example, and the USA made examples they called Sabre Monarch, and it'll show that on the tang here as I show you in a minute. But they were unique in the fact that they were modeled with the 3-digit model number starting with a 2, and they made many different patterns, and each of these patterns had an Ulster counterpart. The reason being these were made in the Ulster facility that was owned by Schrade Walden at the time. So Cole National Sabre brand contracted to Schrade, which owned Ulster. Ulster made the knives. Gets a little confusing, but that's how it works out. So what we have here is a cousin to it, because this is actually an Ulster made knife. Even though it says old timer, you would think maybe it was made by Schrade, but Schrade actually contracted Ulster to make about 5 different old timer knives, 3 of which were part of this promotion by Prince Albert. You can see the Ulster brand right up here, to make these old timer knives. And here are 3 examples of what you could order in this promotion. That I believe Ulster also made 2 other old timer knives at least that are not a part of the promotion, and those are actually quite hard to find. And anyway, so you'd send away 5 wrappers and $2, and you could send off for one of these 3 knives. Now I got the middle one here on the picture. It's the Stockman. It's the 58 OT. So this is actually the Ulster Oldtimer 58 OT. So not made by Schrade, but made by a Schrade-owned company, Ulster, at the time in the mid to late 60s. So not exactly the most common example of an Ulster, which usually they just made their own brand. So that's why I mentioned that, is because typically you would have, a Sabre and then a corresponding Ulster that was essentially the same knife. So you would have another Serpentine Jack, for example, that would be its own knife. And then don't really recall what the Ulster handles were, but I think they were closer in resemblance to what we see on the Sabre here, and not this saw cut Delrin that Schrade typically used, right? So, but they are related, and often when companies would make a Serpentine Jack and a Stockman in the same size, they would just reuse the parts. It was just a way to conserve, be able to make 2 different knives with many of the same parts. So you see the bolsters are the same, the pins are the same, shields are in the same location though, and they're it's obvious that they were built, at the same facility. Obviously the liners on the outsides would be the same. The middle liner would be a little different, one being a little larger than the other. With the 3rd blade in the middle there, you couldn't have a separating liner. It would be one that was the same shape as the springs. But this particular one, you can see, comes all the way to the top, so the middle liner is same as the outside frame liners. So yeah, just a way to reuse parts, right? So you can see that these are very much cousins. If we look at the main blade, they're pretty much the same shape. Minor differences here. You got little larger nail nick on the old timer one in comparison to the Sabre one. But just wanted to kind of show the family tree, if you will, there, and how these two knives are related. But we're primarily going to focus on this knife. I already did a video on the history of the Ulster old timers. If you want to check it out, it's right up here, and you can check out that video. But you've got jigged Delrin handles on this guy, on the 205 Serpentine jack. You got the brass liners, of course the carbon steel springs and carbon steel blades. I believe these are to be nickel silver bolsters and shield and brass pins. But that's actually jigged Delrin. Yeah, it's, if you look on the sides, you can see the brown area here, and it comes black. And then they did the jigging on that. So, yeah, you got this main blade. Again, no action left on it. It's pretty much just like a friction folder at this point on the main blade. But nice little Skinner blade, and it measures about 2 3/8, and the cutting edge about 2 1/8. But again, no snap on it. But the main, or the secondary blade, just a little pin blade, and so it's just a little jackknife, little serpentine jack, model 205. Pretty nice. I think this knife cost me about $13 before shipping, maybe. And it's not expensive. Not hard to know though about the snap, about what you're getting. But the blade looks to be pretty complete, and so a pretty decent example of a Sabre 205. But just an interesting history there, guys. A Sabre Monarch, made in the USA before they went over to Japan, I believe. This predates the Japan knives, which I think were made in the 70s, and these were made a little earlier than that, mid to late 60s. And again, made by Ulster for Cole National for the Sabre brand. So nice, interesting, convoluted history to these knives. And I have other Sabre knives I want to end up showing you guys at some point, but wanted to show you the USA made one that I have here, which most are made by Japan, and maybe just a smidge nicer, the Japanese ones, than the Sabre Monarchs, but they're not bad. And they have that nice Delrin handle on them. So they're pretty much very similar to, these were budget knives. They're very much similar to maybe an old timer you would see today, or a USA made old timer anyway. But there you have it. Schrade gets involved again in so many knives, and they have their hand and their fingerprints on this one too. So Schrade owned Ulster at the time these were made, and they were kind of their budget brand at the time. But yeah, so you could probably put a collection together of both Sabre and Ulster knives as a sort of a combination from the ones that were made in this period. Again, had 3-digit model numbers that started with it too, and this is the 205. But that's going to do it for my kind of overview of the Sabre Monarch type knives, and I hope you guys enjoyed the information. Hopefully it was useful to you, and it didn't confuse you too much with all the different brands and so forth and how they're related. But hope you guys have a fantastic day today, and thank you again, Tom, for the 2 for Tuesday open tag. We'll see you next time.